Hey guys, it's the Everyday Aficionados with another liqueur review for you. Today we have Luxardo's Sangue Morlacco, which is a cherry liqueur. They've been making this for almost 100 years about. And originally it was just called Luxardo Cherry Liqueur. But in 1919, this Italian poet, Gabriele D'Annunzio, his signature is actually right here on the bottle, he renamed it Sangue Morlacco, which means blood of Morlacco. And the Morlacco people are from Dalmatia. Apparently they defended Venice from the Turks when the Turks tried to invade. So it's kind of like an ode to the strength of these Italian people who are known for being great warriors. This is actually the second cherry liqueur that Luxardo's made. The first was Maraschino Original, and this is actually made from the same type of cherries, Marasca cherries, which are actually exclusively cultivated for making these kinds of liqueurs. Apparently they call this a variant of cherry brandy. It's actually made from the fermented juices from the Marasca cherry, which is then fused with the liqueur. It's actually matured for 2 years in oak vats. Also, just if you want to keep prices in mind, it's cheaper than Maraschino Original. This goes for $20 for 750 milliliters, whereas Maraschino is like $30. When you compare it to, say, Maraschino, this is darker. It actually has the color of cherries, whereas Maraschino is entirely clear. It has less of a heady aroma and more of like a earthy, tangy aroma, kind of like wine. So it's interesting to see the contrast between those two.
Take a look at the branding here. It's got that big, giant red Luxardo label that's on every single one of their bottles. Like you said, it actually kind of reminds me of wine a little bit, actually, the way it's labeled. Probably because it's Italian.
I just love Luxardo. For me, they always get points for branding. They just do a really good job of bottling their stuff. It also is corked, but it's not a traditional cork, it's more of like a spout, which helps with pouring. And obviously the darker bottle prevents light from getting at it and disturbing the content, so it has a longer shelf life. I really just love the lettering. It's all embossed. The gold trim is glossy. Also, it's 30% alcohol by volume. Pretty high proof. So we're going to try this neat and on the rocks. I think it's good both ways, but we'll see which one we prefer.
It's got like a dark cherry. That's the best descriptor that I can think of.
It smells strongly of alcohol. It kind of has that like leathery smell of a dark red wine. It's honestly kind of hard to get past the alcohol fumes.
Every time I try to get my nose in there more to like get like some of the actual aromas, my nose burns before I can even get any of the smells out of it. I would say it's more of like a black cherry. It kind of smells like cough syrup a little to me. I don't think it smells too much like wine though. It definitely smells a little unique.
Cheers.
Immediately warming as soon as it hits your tongue and your palate. Burst of warmth.
It's got like a candy-like sweetness.
It kind of almost tastes like the filling to like a chocolate-covered cherry, but it's very warm. Like you're drinking like warm juice or something like that. It's kind of a little off-putting to me. I don't know if I like that.
It feels almost hot because the alcohol is so front and center.
It feels like you left it out in a warm car. That's how warming the alcohol is.
It is really sweet.
I don't get much tart from it.
I do get tartness on the finish. The flavors do stick around for a good while. So I like the finish a lot. I think the entry is a little like... The alcohol just kind of like takes the breath out of your mouth. But once it goes over your palate, I feel like there's a good amount of fruity, sweet flavors.
I'm actually getting a little bit more than just cherries too. Even on the nose now, it almost has like a plum maybe. Like a dried plum.
I would say a plum that isn't so dry, though. More like a juicy plum.
Okay, yeah.
A dried plum has more of like that savory sweetness, whereas I think this is more of like a juicy sweetness. I think it's okay. The alcohol is so front and center that it does feel kind of cough syrupy with the cherry and the alcohol combined. I think it's going to be better on the rocks.
We'll find out. We'll be right back.
Okay, so we got it on ice now. We let it cool and dilute for a little bit, and we're ready for a second tasting.
It's definitely lightened up the smell a little bit. I don't get any of that alcohol burn. And to me, it actually has changed up the smell a little bit in that I think it smells like cranberries.
Like a sweet cranberry, though, not like a sour cranberry.
It just feels lighter. And there's still definitely some cherry in there, too.
Cheers.
The first thing that I noticed in this I've had a lot of Luxardo before. I've had their limoncello, I've had their maraschino, and I noticed the same thing, the same sort of like sweet flavor that's in all of them. It must be like their simple syrup solution that they use, and it just has this really distinct sweetness to it.
And it also affects the mouthfeel and the body. It's got like a really tangy sweetness. The warming is almost completely gone. It doesn't feel hot. It's very cool and really refreshing.
Yeah. And I think it's definitely lost some of its tartness too.
Yeah, it's almost an entirely sweet ride.
But like you said, it's like a tangy sweet. It's got like a sourness to it.
Marasca cherries are a sour variety of cherry, so that makes sense. How would you compare it to maraschino? I would say for me, maraschino feels so distinct. Like I can smell maraschino and taste it.
To me, this is kind of more just like a generic fruity type flavor. Yeah. And it's definitely, it's dominant cherry, but there's definitely some other fruity flavors going on with this one. Like maybe like a blackberry. Yes. Definitely like some cranberries and even some plum in there too.
Yeah, I do feel that putting it on ice has made it feel a little bit thinner though and less substantial.
I'm kind of perplexed with this one because I kind of want the taste that it had when it was neat, but I want like the lack of alcohol and the smoothness of it being iced. I wish it could have met in the middle somewhere.
It feels less remarkable, less memorable on ice, although it's much easier to drink. So, as you can see, we have 2 empty glasses, meaning unanimous recommendations from the Everyday Aficionados. But that's not an entirely wholehearted recommendation, at least on my part. I'd say for a score, I'd give this thing a weak 3. It's recommended, but you don't have to go out and buy it, and you're not really missing that much if you don't try it. I would definitely say go for the maraschino if you want a cherry liqueur, especially since it's from the same manufacturer. Of course, it's a little bit more expensive. It's about $8 more, but I would say that $8 is well worth the difference in quality and character. This liqueur it's a nice drinking experience. It has an entirely different character when it's neat and when it's on the rocks, and they're both enjoyable, although there are drawbacks for each. When it's neat, the alcohol's too harsh, and when it's on the rocks, the flavor feels cheapened. It's a good drink, although I think it just makes a little too many compromises along the way.
I'm going to recommend it too, but it's not a very strong recommendation. The basis of my recommendation is basically just because I haven't really had anything like this yet, so I do think it's really unique. I do think it's worth drinking. It's not a bad drinking experience at all. I think I enjoyed it a little bit more on the rocks than I did straight, just because that burn is pretty prominent. Although I did like the flavor more when it was neat. I kind of wish there was a happy medium there somewhere, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. As for a rating, I'm going to give this one a weak 3 also. If we did halves, it'd probably be a 2.5. It's safe to say that this is good. You don't have to have it, but you're not going to be mad if you bought it.
But again, there are other options out there, especially if you want to do a cherry liqueur. I would say definitely go for maraschino.
Yeah. I agree with that too. Maraschino definitely, it blows this one out of the water. If you're a wine drinker, maybe you might prefer something like this as opposed to like the maraschino.
That is the Everyday Aficionados with our Luxardo Sangue Morlacco review. See you next time.
I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty crunk right now.
I crank the crunk.
That crunked.
I got cranked on crunk.
I'm all the way crunked.
All the way turned up.
Well, you need to turn down. Testicles.
Like, damn, you didn't even leave.